Alright, how's it going, guys? It is Glake back again from the Evidentries / the Phantom Pages. We're finally getting around to continuing more of the completion process today. It's been a couple days, but we'll be ready because it's going to be another long one. We're picking up from so we're picking up from chapter 9, so this is going to be the chapter 9 part 2 chapter 9 2 of 2 video. The last one was 1 of 2. It's a very long chapter, which is why I decided to split it into 2 videos. This one's going to be about 20 pages or so, so not too long, but we're going to pick up on the last section of the chapter that I left off on. And in case you're lost or don't remember what we were reading the previous reading, the chapter is entitled, this is part 3 of the book, Reconciliation, and the chapter title is Life-Changing Impact of the Completion Process. So here we go, picking up off on chapter 9. Welcome to self-love and compassionate understanding. One of the main benefits William received was an increase in his ability to love himself. Feeling a boost of one's level of self-love is a natural result of the completion process, because the process allows us to reduce our fear. When we are no longer crippled with fear, it doesn't bother us as much when other people express negative opinions about us in our daily lives. We don't feel it so deeply. And instead of succumbing to self-doubt and self-loathing in the face of criticism, we begin to see other people's hurtful actions as an indication of the pain and fear within themselves. We also know that we can use their hurtful opinions and actions as an excuse to integrate ourselves further and heal ourselves even more. Another benefit related to this is the gift of the gift of compassionate understanding. The more you practice the completion process, the more you will begin to see that all behavior, no matter how malevolent it may seem, is done in an effort to feel better. Once you embrace this reality, you will find that the behavior of the people around you will start to make more sense. This means that every single act in existence, whether it involves wanting to kiss someone or kill them, is committed for one reason and one reason only: to feel better. So in fact, there are no such things as hostile, evil, or malevolent intentions in our universe. All things ultimately boil down to wanting to feel better and thinking that a particular action will make us feel better. This allows you to more fully understand that during your childhood, you formed an unconscious definition of love by watching and interacting with your primary caregivers. As an adult, you will live your life according to this early definition, regardless of how healthy or unhealthy your unconscious definition of love really is. So if we were shamed as children, we associate love with the feeling of being shamed. Thus, we seek out partners and friends who will shame us because subconsciously we think that's what love is. We assume love hurts, but the good news is that the completion process sheds light on the truth on the situation. The process reveals that we have come to this life with particular triggers which will help us identify and work through our emotional and mental wounds. Because those wounds are all that prevent us from becoming the embodiment of unconditional love. That's why when we do the completion process, we begin to uncover this pattern within ourselves and develop the ability to see it in others. The completion process forces us to be unconditionally loving to ourselves, and as a result, we develop the capacity to become unconditionally loving toward others. This produces an incredible ripple effect that radiates far outside of our own circle of influence. There's actually something I need to check real quick before I move on to the next paragraph. I just don't want to run out of space while I'm in the middle of recording, because I know I was getting kind of low on space on this hard drive. Okay, no, we'll be completely fine. Okay, here's how it works. The completion process not only creates peace and compassion within our minds and hearts, but it also creates peace and compassionate love on an interpersonal worldwide level. Whatever we do to ourselves affects the collective. When we integrate ourselves, we cause integration within the collective. When we become unconditionally loving, we cause the collective to become unconditionally loving. When we find peace within ourselves, we cause peace within the collective. In this way, the completion process affects anything it comes into contact with. By starting to use it, we set in motion a benevolent shock wave that will forever change the course of our lives as well as the course of the world. When parenting brings up your own issues. As much as we would all like to leave the world a better place, for most of us we are consumed with just balancing our own inner and outer realities on any given day. An example of this that you might relate to is Misty's story. I remember when I first met her, she was a stay-at-home mom of 3. She was struggling to figure out how to be a mother because no one had prepared her for such an incredible personal challenge. She loved her children dearly, but she had no idea how much unresolved stuff that her children would bring up in her. I enjoyed helping her and watching her confidence as a mother and a woman improve through the work we did together. When Misty spoke about her days at home with all the new responsibilities, I could relate to it myself, and I have since coached many different clients who had similar issues. Here's how Misty described her reality when we first met. Some days I'd find myself becoming so reactive to the littlest things, and then I'd spiral into guilt and feel like the worst mom in the world, she admits. It became obvious to me that if I care for other people every day, I needed my own support, and more specifically, I needed some help dealing with my own emotions. After her children would go to bed at night, Misty loved to read, so she started learning about emotional healing. She says she found a lot of good techniques, but always had a nagging sense that there was something deeper and that she was just scratching the surface. Then she hit upon something new that really resonated with her. She found the completion process. She said it was one of those things that just found its way into her somehow. I attended a seminar about the process, thinking originally that I'd use it just for me, Misty recalls. But when I started using it, I was absolutely floored. I had thought that I was a really together person. But once I started doing the process, I realized that I was simply coping with my marriage and with my kids by numbing myself out. In fact, I had started to cope with all my difficult emotions and thoughts by using prescription medication. It's hard for any parent to admit this, but Misty knew she could not keep using those coping mechanisms. She went on to say how hard it was to come clean, even to herself. I had never actually faced the trauma in my past, she shared with me. Being the wife of a successful husband and the leader of a women's group in my local church, I was expected to be a role model and set an example in my community. I couldn't just let myself fall apart, but the completion process made me realize how unfulfilled I felt and how insecure I felt as a wife and mother. As Misty gained strength and personal insight, she finally faced head-on how much she hated the role she was playing. One day she just admitted to herself and to her husband that she had enough. I let myself fall apart, and it was ultimately the best thing that ever happened to me and my marriage and my family, Misty says. Through the process of facing her inner self, Misty was able to put her full self back together. She began by modeling her life after her actual desires rather than trying to be everything for everyone else in her life. She was amazed by the effects she began to experience, not only inside herself, but inside her home. I started to notice that the emotional health of my children was improving, she explains. They acted out less and got along with each other more, and they seemed healthier. It was obvious that they were mirroring my emotional state, which had greatly improved. When she asked me if she could use the process directly with her children, I said yes, and she went on to guide her oldest son through the process. She thought it would be hard to do it with children, but in fact, she found that it was easier. Her son had no trouble at all accessing his emotions and expressing his true needs. He intuitively knew what to do to resolve his emotional pain. He cried to her about how much pressure he felt to get good grades and how he was so sad when her husband had told him that he was disappointed in him a few months earlier. After the session, Misty said she noticed there was a renewed brightness in her son's eyes. The heaviness in him disappeared overnight, she says. I could see that he felt understood and seen by me, and to my surprise, his food allergies started to go away. Now we use this process all the time in our house. It has made me a better person, a better mother, and a better wife. My family is closer than ever, and most of all, my kids are happy. Because of this process, my kids will not have to drag their emotional baggage with them into their adult lives, and to me, that is priceless. In addition to healing her family, Misty was able to overcome the things that were preventing her from progressing in life. In her case, she was able to stop taking prescription drugs to numb her pain, which was a huge step forward. I see this same thing happen with many clients who are finally able to give up destructive habits. It happens because once we integrate and become conscious, we have the strength to put an end to negative behaviors. Things like procrastination, fighting, lying, using drugs, self-sabotaging, withdrawing, and other destructive behaviors. These are all just coping skills or adaptations we develop as a result of our traumatic experience. Once we integrate those experiences, there is no longer any use for the adaptation, and so it goes away. Overcoming ritual trauma and incest. Anything that causes a person any kind of trauma at any time of their lives can get stuck in their body and mind and cause havoc later when a trigger brings up the past in some way. This is particularly true with people who have faced ritual abuse in their lives, and I do know this kind of horrific experience firsthand. When I meet people like Angela in the story below, I feel it is an honor to work with them to help them resolve such deep emotional suffering. I am proud to work with Angela I'm proud to work why can I read this? I am proud of the work Angela has done to rescue her own to secure her own healing. Here is how she describes it. My entire life has been a state of empty dissociation. I had no feelings. I was in a permanent state of numbness with only slight variations of discomfort or pain. I tried years of different therapies, and I had read countless self-help books. I was in a state of desperation, dying to get past the internal blocks that kept me disconnected from everything in my life, including my children. Angela found that talk therapy and holistic therapy only seemed to get her so far, but those approaches helped her get started, and she is grateful. Those therapies helped her realize that she was suffering from sexual trauma and deep emotional wounds, but it didn't help much to get her beyond the realization of unhealthy patterns. But when she tried the completion process, it was the first type of therapy that actually got her into her own body to the degree that she could actually feel. The first time she tried it, she started unraveling the trauma that she had locked away through disassociation. She went back into a memory of being 1 year old, and even then, she could see she was a victim of ritual trauma and incest. It's one of the most complex and extreme forms of abuse that someone can suffer. Going through the completion process has blown my reality to pieces, but I would never turn back even if that was an option, Angela explains. I would take all of the earth-shattering emotional pain I am going through as I work through this over the hollow numbness that existed before. Anything is better than being that sleepwalker that I was. Within 4 months, her efforts at healing took off. She began doing things she never thought she would be capable of doing, such as driving a car by herself. She overcame her agoraphobia and soon was able to leave the house by herself. She found that she could think through and process stressful situations instead of completely avoiding them and relying on others to take care of her as she had in the past. Angela says that the completion process woke her up to a reality that she did not consciously create, but rather one that she just drifted into. This has forced me into a position where I have to completely change my life and the relationships I had formed. which has not been easy or without heartache, she explains. I find that I just can't settle for less in my life anymore. The best gift to myself throughout all this is that I now have the ability to be unconditionally present with myself and with others. Angela is still afraid sometimes that the amount of emotional pain, hopelessness, and despair she experienced might come up again, but now she says she trusts that she has a tool that will guide her. But now she says she trusts that she has a tool that will guide her through it to the other side. I have now felt joy, love, and happiness in a way I never thought was possible for me. Even though that comes with its own set of fears, I can't help but feel eternally grateful for this gift I've been given in my life. Next section, working with prison inmates. Another group of people I sincerely wanted to impact, even from the beginning of my career as a healer, are people in the prison system. The completion process is a significant breakthrough practice for many inmates because so many of them suffer with trauma, addictions, depression, and chronically low self-esteem. I have long believed that most prisoners within our justice system are incarcerated because of trauma that they had never been able to resolve from their childhoods. This next story is from a man named Michael who works with inmates. He provided me with such a thoughtful description of this population that I was happy when he agreed that I could share his words here. Michael has been a volunteer in jails for many years, mostly teaching meditation to the inmates. He finds this to be a very rewarding experience for many reasons. Jail is a sensory deprived environment that induces self-reflection because there is little distraction. All the basics of life are taken care of, so inmates have very little to do and virtually no control over their daily routines. Michael says that research shows that an inmate makes only 20 decisions a day compared to the 200 decisions an average person makes. Oops, sorry about that. Prison inmates don't have the luxury to do all the things we take for granted, such as choosing our clothes in the morning, deciding what to eat, when to visit friends and family, or even just going for a walk in the park. Stuck in this kind of limited reality, there's a natural urge for them to learn to be happy independently of their environment. And Michael says that this is what meditation offers them, a way to take control of their minds. When he told me that the inmates reported feeling good and were more hopeful after each group meditation session he facilitated, he still had a nagging feeling that he could be doing more. He wanted to act as a sort of anchor to bring them hope, to help them change their lives and create a better reality for themselves, if he possibly could. That's when he came across the work I was doing in helping people to heal past trauma. About 2 years ago, he heard about the work and he resonated with my teachings on shadow work in particular. He heard my explanation about healing in the emotional body, which is the key component of the completion process. Michael first practiced the technique to heal some of his own traumas and then decided to suggest it to the inmates. For the ones who wanted to participate, Michael started with his regular Buddhist meditation, and once the participants were brought to a higher state of consciousness, he asked if any of them wanted to volunteer to be guided through the completion process. It has since become a popular addition to their group sessions. Since I first introduced the process, there has not been a single session where there aren't at least 2 or 3 inmates who have breakthrough or deep emotional releases, says Michael. It's astounding to watch these men that people see as dangerous and violent do inner child work and cry like small children. A lot of heart connections are created, and I often regret that we aren't able to hug each other because it's forbidden to have physical contact with convicts. After such cathartic experiences, I have learned that a number of these men have been able to create new lives for themselves without addiction and crime. Michael believes that this therapy is the light that can transform the most isolated and darkest parts of our society. Next section, feelings of childhood innocence return. Imagine the freedom that comes with rediscovering your childhood innocence. Once the inmates that Michael worked with got back in touch with the inner child inside them, they gained the positive aspects of childhood, rekindling an important inner relationship. They could then find themselves able to have fun again, gaining the innocence they had lost touch with. By delving into the subconscious and integrating pain, we will all find that what remains is innocence. Innocence is a lightness of being. It's a worry-free state. There's purity to this state because there is nothing obscuring our light. Most people associate innocence with ignorance or with weakness, but innocence is neither of those things. When we gain knowledge, we don't have to lose innocence. This only occurs if the knowledge we gain causes us to move into a space of pain or fear. And contrary to popular opinion, there is an immense bravery in innocence. Innocence is a state of openness. It's a fundamentally unafraid state. Its light is not guarded. It's benevolent and untouchable. We may be able to obscure the light of our innocence to the degree that we have no awareness of it, but the light itself will not go out. The more wisdom you gain, the closer you get to a state of innocence. We could all benefit from regaining our ability to play. Play is defined as engagement in an activity for enjoyment and recreation, rather than for a serious or practical purpose. This is where we have to stop and think. In the very definition of the word play, we find the dysfunction of the society we have co-created. We have all grown up thinking that play is not connected to purpose. We have been led to believe that there is something more important than happiness itself. Then we grow up and wonder why we aren't happy without realizing that one reason is because we don't take the straight path to it by prioritizing enjoyment. Rather, we spend our lives beating about the bush, hoping that our happiness will come as a result of other priorities, like keeping a reliable job or reaching our goals. By partaking in the completion process, we begin to prioritize our enjoyment. And we find that in a state that is less guarded and afraid, we begin to play again. Next section, how social workers can employ the completion process. So many different populations can benefit from the completion process that I feel sometimes we have only scratched the surface so far. That's why I'm thankful. So to people like Leslie, that's why I'm thankful to people like Leslie for sharing the process with others through her practice as a licensed clinical social worker. Leslie has found an effective way to incorporate the completion process into her daily practice with clients and agrees that it sets up people to be much more successful in their own healing. Most people who come to see me as a therapist are not used to honoring their negative emotions, Leslie explains. So I spend so much time as needed helping them understand their tendency to avoid feelings and to see that avoidance happening in real time. I also interject compassionate responses to their emotions to show them how different it feels to have their emotions validated. Leslie reports that the biggest obstacle to clients fully doing the completion process is that they have an unconscious fear of their own feelings. She says that her clients have often spent years mentally working on their life issues, so it's not easy to get them to accept and understand that there is yet another critical step they need to make. In her professional opinion, the two most important aspects of the completion process are accepting the importance of feelings and emotions and having a willingness to understand the existence the existence of the inner child, even if seen as only a mental construct. Once clients can make the leap to understanding that the inner child exists, she sees a knowing in their physical expression. It's a recognition of themselves, which is like a big relief, as if they are finally saying, "I'm home." She particularly appreciates how the details in the first step are designed to create a personalized safe place through guided meditation. The creation of the safe haven is done so thoroughly that it lets her clients truly create only what their mind knows is satisfying. She believes that this individualized creation gives the completion process a unique healing foundation. Leslie also says she likes that the completion process is a linear and limited process with 18 clearly defined steps. The steps give people a safe structure with which to allow the feelings that have never been safe to express before, Leslie adds. Some of my clients dive right into the process and get to feel, possibly for the first time in a while, an all rightness, because their primary support or adult self is able to mentally construct unconditional loving kindness and give it to their hurt inner child. Next section, stopping the battle with food and weight. I find the following personal story is also quite captivating because it deals with a few common conditions in our world today: obesity, eating disorders, and depression. I have worked with a number of people to help them overcome their weight issues, but this story from Zach Moyer is one that I will never forget. He is a public figure and his transformative story is well known, so he is happy to have me use his real name. Zach works as a holistic health consultant, writer, food justice. Sorry, let me reread that. Zach works as a holistic health instructor, writer, food justice advocate, I've never heard of that, and speaker. When you follow his journey, you'll see he's come a long way. He tells his story better than I ever could, so here goes. In 2011, I was obese, self-medicated, depressed, and chronically ill. Due to chronic throat infections and strong psychiatric medications, I was practically bedridden for months because I had given up on life. Since childhood, I had always struggled with consistent weight gain, and it made me feel completely out of control. When I got older, those same feelings of being out of control manifested in my life as binge eating disorder. As my health declined and my mental health suffered, one fateful night I contemplated whether I would live or die. In that moment, I felt like I had a choice. I could either take the entire bottle of pills I was prescribed and go to sleep, or I could try to keep going. Thinking of my family and friends and not wanting them to deal with my early departure, I chose to live. Over the years, in an attempt to figure it all out, I sought many opinions. Each psychiatrist I saw explained to me that I had a chemical imbalance in my brain, and the only solution was to shoot arrows in the dark at the problem in the form of various drugs. Until one of those arrows hit the target. I was put on unfathomable doses of various medications and was told to accept that this would be the rest of my life. My conventional therapist took a different approach and seemed to have one clear objective: to fix me. My depression was treated as something that I had to fight and resist. My wounded ego told me that my only salvation was to settle down and get myself together. Yet, my spirit was relentlessly determined to not settle or accept feeling the way I did on a permanent basis. But before I knew it, the cocktail of medications I was on was so strong that I struggled to wake up in the morning and stay awake during the day. Yet I was still dangerously overweight, sick, and depressed. Every night I would make a trip to the grocery store in an attempt to comfort myself. I stocked up on frozen pizza, tortilla chips, shredded cheese by the bag, guacamole, and frozen french fries to be topped off by 2 liters of diet soda and a pint of ice cream. In a manic episode, I would race home from the store each night to prepare my binge. Binging was perhaps the most pleasurable thing I had ever done in my life. In my little private studio apartment, I could hide from the world with my comforts of my food and escape from life, responsibility, and rejection. One night while I was lying in bed binging on ice cream sandwiches, all of a sudden my heart began palpitating and I felt a painful, sharp sensation in my chest. In total shock and fear, I put the sandwich down Two thoughts crossed my mind in that moment. The first one was, I am literally giving myself a heart attack. If this kills me, I am going to die alone in my disgusting studio apartment. I will not be found for days, and when I am, they will discover me in my own filth, surrounded by food. The second thought came to me in the form of two powerful questions. Is this healthy behavior? Do healthy people eat like I do? The answer was a loud and resounding no. From that moment on, I had a new awareness, and then the missing solution came to me through one of Teal Swan's YouTube videos in her series Ask Teal. When I heard her explain that it is our childhood trauma that roots us in the dysfunctional, debilitating pain we feel in adulthood, I finally realized that nothing is wrong with me. Instead, a lot of bad things have happened to me. This catapulted my healing journey. Once I began the process of facing my emotions, began feeling more complete, I weaned myself off of years' worth of medication, put an end to my dangerous food binges. My depressive tendencies vanished, and I was inspired to adopt a holistic, healthy lifestyle. I even began a productive healing and restorative dialogue with my parents about my childhood. In return, I lost 110 pounds, cured my hypertension, cured my gastric esophageal reflux disease, and brought my cholesterol down to normal. I believe that going through the completion process was what ultimately helped me break free from the chains of medications, substances, and binge eating disorders. I now feel more empathetic and patient with myself in the context of my own weight management. After living and working with this process for myself, I chose to become certified to facilitate the completion process for others. I enjoy helping people who wish to better manage their weight issues. Instead of giving them a diet and exercise plan, I work with them to uncover their triggers, memories, and emotions. Time and time again, I see that this healing work lifts the anchors that keep them stagnating in dysfunction. We can all learn that it is safe to feel, safe to remember, and most important, safe to be who we truly are. Next section, returning to health and wellness. This story is from Zach's life. The story from Zach's life illustrates that physical ailments we suffer with that are caused by emotional and mental wounds of the past can indeed be healed. Even if you have been struggling with chronic illness or disease for years, it can clear up rather quickly once you start making choices for yourself that are in alignment with health. Don't be surprised then if you find that your diet naturally and effortlessly gravitates toward foods that are good for you. You might find that you effortlessly gravitate toward activities and people that are good for you. Eventually, you'll find that you are living a much healthier lifestyle, and you didn't have to struggle to get there. Quite likely, you'll also find that you have more energy when the completion process becomes part of your life. That happened for Zach, and it can happen for you. The reason is that our fractured childhood selves are like lost streams of energy that are now reintegrated into our body. Our whole consciousness is in fact a huge stream of energy, so the more we integrate our fractured selves, the more energy of consciousness we have in the now. Zach was also able to reconnect with other people and open up to a friend who later became his roommate. This is because when we are fully integrated and develop the capacity for unconditional focused presence and unconditional love, we are like magnets that are irresistible to people. People begin to gravitate toward us, and we become less lonely. Being around us feels good, and we begin to influence others to heal just by being near them. Another aspect to this is that we become intensely attractive to other people because we represent what their own being is craving to become. Next section, being empowered to live a full life. Like Zach and most of my clients, Maggie is also someone who longs for some semblance of normal. Life just isn't easy for people like Maggie, who had to work so hard to overcome sexual abuse from her past and somehow put her life back together. In Maggie's case, she was confused about what actually happened to her as a child that had left her still traumatized years later. She wasn't even completely sure whether her abuse had actually happened or if maybe she had somehow made it up. Her story is so much like many other women in this world that I think it's valuable to share what she went through as she found healing and found a way to help heal others. The trauma Maggie was seeking to overcome was a memory of sexual abuse. While she wasn't certain about it, somewhere deep inside she knew that she could not have generated such a specific memory of an actual person in only her imagination. By the time I met her, she had held on to this particular trauma for about 33 years of her life. The memory tormented her because it made her doubt and question her own memory, her psyche, and her own human nature. When this trigger would become activated, I would go into fight or flight mode with whatever people were around me. Maybe that's when, but I guess it's with whatever people were around me. And no one was exempt, not even customer service folks or even police officers or colleagues, Maggie recalls. As you can well imagine, this led to many situations in my life that were less than ideal. I was unaware of the very real connection between that early trauma and my sometimes crazy responses to situations in my daily life that caused me to feel unsafe. This trauma also caused many problems in my close relationships with family and friends, and it even ended relationships for me at different times. Maggie saw 3 different therapists on and off for more than 13 years. She didn't like the way her therapist seemed to pretend they were not human beings with authentic feelings. They were always guarded and they never expressed any emotional reaction to the things she shared. Maggie says she hated the way she could see them mentally trying to figure out the best thing to say rather than just validating what she was feeling. For me personally then, the completion process was everything that traditional counseling never had been and everything I desperately needed. Maggie explains. Finally, I was being given the ability and opportunity to create a safe haven in my mind. And even before having to discuss painful emotions, having Teal's gentle presence guiding me through those feelings was like being flown through the air to safety by Superman. It was terrifying because I could fall and die, but also safe and reassuring because she was there. One moment that stands out in Maggie's memory was the time when I suggested that she walk right up and knock out her abuser with the meditative process. Maggie says that really helped empower her during that very critical part. She also says that she appreciated how the entire process moved at her own pace. Maggie says she felt raw during the process, but also more validated than ever before in her entire life. The first time I went through the process, I felt things such as scared, sad, embarrassed, shaky, and hopeless, Maggie recalls. Then these shifted into feelings of being empowered, supported, validated, safe, and calm. Prior to this point, I found it really difficult to genuinely be present with someone else's emotions. I was unable to connect with people on a deep emotional level. Now I am much more capable of sitting with any level of deep emotional pain, and I know that this is a direct result of sitting with my own pain. Maggie has since become a completion process certified practitioner and says that she continues to be humbled and amazed at the level of healing that can occur, often in just one session. I have had the opportunity and pleasure of helping a great many people to integrate traumas that had happened to them at whatever age they might have been, right from the time spent in the womb to 8 years old and beyond. I'm surprised at my own capacity to be present with the pain of others as they share memories of extreme physical or emotional abuse and violence. Next section. Integration improves all your relationships. Relationships naturally become healthier when you begin to heal because you learn how to be loving and independent rather than codependent. Before we integrate ourselves, we desperately try to get our unconscious needs met, And so we enter into relationships because we are trying to fill the hole left behind by our suppressed self. We are in relationships for reasons other than love, but we don't realize it. Once we begin to reintegrate ourselves, the holes within our being begin to fill in. We start to become whole, and therefore we start to enter into relationships through conscious choice instead of subconscious choice. Another way of saying this is that we form relationships for love instead of to meet our subconscious needs. We also become capable of giving love unconditionally. So as a result, conflict leaves our relationships. We become capable of giving and receiving love, and because we have become more conscious of ourselves, we make conscious decisions in the relationships. Our partners stop triggering us drastically as they once did, and we are less reactive. We may even begin to use conflict in the relationship as a healthy excuse to heal together rather than a reason to blame the other person. Next section, the practice of putting yourself back together again. At times, the suffering we experience here on earth seems unbearable, but there is an upside to suffering. The upside, and therefore purpose, of suffering is that suffering cuts us off from our true selves. Wait, let me reread that. But there is an upside to suffering. The upside, and therefore purpose, of suffering is that suffering cuts us off from our true selves and from our joy to such a degree that we cannot take it any longer. It brings us to a crossroads where we have nothing more to lose, so we begin to do things drastically different. You can only suffer so much before the only thing left to do is to stop running from what scares you, no matter what the cost. By deciding this, you set yourself free. You realize that the only answer is to turn around and walk toward your aversion instead. You learn the art of allowing. Instead of feeling better, your aim is to get better at feeling. As a result, you become intensely present. The unconsciousness within you becomes conscious. Craving becomes pure desire. The shadow within you is no longer separated from the light of your own consciousness. You begin to integrate, and as a result, you start to experience yourself as whole. This is when you catch a glimpse of peace for the very first time. From this day on, you will see each moment of your life as a new beginning. Each moment is an opportunity to begin anew. And so each day, you will seize that opportunity with clear eyes. You will see that life is not the past, and life is not the future. Life is now. All that you are has culminated in the now, and all that will be is manifesting in the now. The objective reality of internalness, which exists far beyond the confines of the subjective truth of time, contains a glimpse of an axiom. The axiom is this: because time does not exist, it is your choice what you become in each moment. You cannot become more or less of what you already are and always are. What you already and always are. The common thread that weaves its way through all the varied experiences that people have with the completion process is the feeling of being put back together or becoming whole. But the truth is, you were never broken. You were never less than complete. Inevitably, when you strive to become complete by committing to the process of putting yourself back together again, you will one day arrive at the realization that you were, are, and will always be whole and complete exactly as you are in your perfect state of continual evolution. Alright, and that's going to do it for Chapter 9, Part 2, and we are on to what I believe is the final little section of the book, and we'll finish that up in, I'm actually skimming through here. So yeah, the rest of this is pretty much, just thanking, I guess, inspirations behind the book and just people who helped her write it, as well as steps if you wanted to become a completion process practitioner. But other than that, what we have immediately next is a small little chapter entitled Afterward, and it's very, very short. And we'll do that in the final reading, which will be the next upload for this book. But in the meantime, the Kybalion will be up next with the next chapter from that, so stay tuned for that if you're into that stuff. But otherwise, we've got one more upload coming for the completion process, and then this book will be at its end. So I appreciate you guys sticking around, appreciate you listening. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment below if there's anything that stuck out to you about any of the experiences and testimonials listed in that chapter. We'd love to hear them, but otherwise that's going to do it for this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your energy, and I'll see you guys in the next one very soon. Take care.